Here is a breakdown that most people have never seen laid out this way. Of all the wealthy people in the world, roughly 75% built it through owning a business, 15% through investing, 7% inherited it, 3% earned it through sports, entertainment, or the arts, and 0% got there by simply earning a salary and spending it. Zero. That number is worth sitting with, because for most working professionals in the United States, a salary is the entire plan. Show up, earn, repeat. And the question nobody asks out loud is, if that path has a 0% success rate at producing real wealth, why is it the default advice? In this video, we're going to walk through what those first four categories actually have in common, and how that shared principle translates into a concrete system you can apply regardless of your income level right now. Once you see that distinction clearly, the old way of thinking about income starts to feel like running on a treadmill, motion without progress. And the system we're about to walk through is what gets you off it. My name is Alex. If you've ever earned a decent salary and still wondered why your financial position doesn't reflect years of hard work, stay with me. Because the answer lies in what the top 1% do differently with their money, not how much they make, how deliberately they move it. And I'm going to show you exactly how that system works. That starts with understanding the core shift that separates every single one of those categories from the salary earner. The difference between people who earn money and people who own the things that produce it. Nobody sits down one day and decides to stay broke. That's not how it happens. What actually happens is quieter, and honestly, more frustrating. People spend years doing the respectable things, earning, saving, showing up, and still end up feeling like the numbers never quite work. The reason, more often than not, is that they were taught to focus on income, not on what income is supposed to become. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Earning money and owning things that produce money are not the same activity. They feel similar from the outside. Both show up in your bank account, but one stops the moment you stop working. The other doesn't. Think about two guys, both 38, both pulling in around $85,000 a year. One is a logistics coordinator at a regional shipping company. The other spent the last 6 years quietly buying index funds, maxing out his Roth IRA, and picking up a small rental property in a mid-sized city. On a Tuesday afternoon, the logistics coordinator takes a sick day and loses 8 hours of pay. The other guy's accounts don't care that he's sick. His money is already working. Same income on paper. Completely different financial position underneath. That gap is what separates earners from owners. And it's not about being rich to start. It's about understanding which category your money currently lives in. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, but I have a 401k. That's your employer retirement account. So I'm already investing. And yeah, that's a real thing. That counts. But here's what most people miss. Having an investment account and having a system that consistently feeds that account are two different things. One is a container, the other is the engine. Without the engine, the container just sits there. This is where the shift in thinking has to happen. The wealthy don't just earn and spend and hope something's left over. They build a structure around their income before it gets a chance to disappear. Every dollar that comes in already has a destination, not because they're obsessive about budgeting, but because they decided upfront what their money is for. That structure is what financial experts keep coming back to, across the board, regardless of their specific philosophy or approach. The details vary, the percentages shift, but the underlying architecture is consistent. Income goes in, the system sorts it, assets come out the other side. And here's what's worth sitting with for a second. In 2026, the median household income in the United States sits at around $78,000 a year. That is genuinely enough to build something meaningful over time. Not enough to be careless with, but enough, if it's directed well. The people who feel financially stuck at that income level aren't failing because of the number. They're failing because the number has no system behind it. That's the core shift. Stop thinking about money as something you earn and spend. Start thinking about it as something you route, deliberately, repeatedly, in the same direction every single time. Once that clicks, the next question becomes obvious. What does the routing actually look like? Where does the money go, and in what order, and for what purpose? That's where the 4-bucket framework comes in. And the first bucket is the one that makes or breaks the whole thing. It's your essentials, the financial foundation on which everything else is built. Here's the uncomfortable question most financial advice skips entirely. If your essential costs are already consuming 80% of your income, does it matter how disciplined you are with the rest? Not really. You can optimize the edges all you want. But if the foundation is overloaded, the whole system leaks from the bottom. That's why the first bucket isn't exciting. It's not supposed to be. It's structural, it's the floor. And getting it right is what makes every other bucket actually function. So, what counts as an essential? The definition matters here because people tend to expand it quietly over time. Essentials are the non negotiables: rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, transportation to and from work, minimum debt payments. That's the list. Not subscriptions, not dining out, and not the gym membership you've had since 2021 and used twice a month. Those feel necessary. They're not. Essentials are the things that, if unpaid, break your ability to function. The general target most experts land on is somewhere between 50 and 60% of take-home income. Mark Tilbury argues for the leaner 50% end. Others, like Humphrey Yang, put it closer to 60, especially given where costs have moved in the last few years. And honestly, that adjustment is worth acknowledging. In 2026, the average American renter is spending just over 30% of their gross income on housing alone. In cities like Austin, Denver, or Raleigh, places that were considered affordable as recently as 5 years ago, that number is pushing 35. Add utilities, a car payment, insurance, and groceries, and you can hit 60% without making a single irresponsible decision. So no, you're not failing if you can't land at 50. The goal isn't the number, the goal is awareness. Here's how this plays out in practice. A 34-year-old HR manager in Nashville brings home around $5,200 a month after taxes. Her rent is $1,400. Car payment and insurance run $430. Utilities and groceries come to about $600. Minimum payment on her student loans is $280. That's $2,710 a month on pure essentials. Just over 52%, technically within range. But she had never actually added it up before. She just knew money felt tight. When she ran the numbers, she understood why. There was nothing left to route anywhere meaningful. That's the real value of this bucket. Not hitting a target, understanding where your floor actually is, and once you know the floor, you can make real decisions. Maybe you negotiate rent when the lease renews. Maybe you refinance the car. Maybe you move one subscription from essential feeling to clearly optional and redirect that $30 somewhere with more leverage. Small shifts in the foundation create real room above it. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, I cap my essentials, I free up some cash. What's the first thing I do with it? And this is where a lot of people make a quiet mistake. They jump straight to investing before they've built any protection underneath the investment. That's like putting a second floor on a house that doesn't have a stable ground floor yet. Before the future wealth bucket comes into play, there's a bucket that has to come first, one that most people either skip entirely or treat as optional. It's your safety net. And what happens to your entire financial system when that net isn't there is worth understanding in detail. Most people treat an emergency fund like a reward, something you build after the real financial work is done. Pay off the debt first. Max the retirement account first. Then, once things settle down, maybe set some cash aside for a rainy day. That logic feels responsible. It's actually backwards. Here's why. Without a cash buffer sitting underneath your financial life, every single other thing you're building is exposed. The retirement contributions, the investment account, the careful budgeting, all of it becomes fragile the moment an unexpected bill shows up and there's nowhere else to pull from. A 2026 survey found that nearly 57% of Americans could not cover an unexpected expense of $1,000 from savings alone. Sit with that number for a second. More than half the country, and one surprise bill away from either borrowing, missing payments, or raiding an account that was never meant to be touched. And here's what makes it worse. The damage isn't just the expense itself, it's the chain reaction that follows. Take a 37-year-old dental technician in Phoenix. Solid income, consistent saver, has been putting money into his retirement account for 5 years. Then his HVAC unit fails in July. In Phoenix, the replacement quote comes back at $4,200. He doesn't have it liquid, so it goes on a credit card at 23% interest. To manage the monthly payments, he suspends his retirement contributions for 5 months. Those 5 months of paused contributions, compounded forward over 26 years at a 7% average annual return, can cost him roughly $13,000 in future value. A $4,000 home repair with no buffer underneath it quietly turns into a $13,000 retirement gap. The safety net didn't just fail to catch him. Its absence reached forward in time and cost him money he hadn't even earned yet. That's the structural gap this bucket exists to close. So, how do you build it without feeling like you're stalling everything else? Start with a target that's actually reachable. Forget 3 to 6 months for now. That's the right destination, but it's also the kind of number that makes people freeze and do nothing. Begin with 1 month of your essential costs only, not your full lifestyle budget, just the floor from the previous bucket: rent, utilities, groceries, transport, and minimum debt payments. And for most households in a mid sized American city right now, that lands somewhere between $2,400 and $3,000. Fund that first. That single month of essentials is what handles the flat tire, the emergency vet visit, the busted pipe on a Sunday night. Once that's in place, build toward the full cushion, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. That's the number that protects you from a job loss, a medical situation, or anything that pulls you away from income for a meaningful stretch of time. It converts a potential crisis into something you can actually manage. Where this money lives matters just as much as having it. 3 rules. First, it has to be reachable within 24 hours. This is not locked up in a certificate of deposit or a brokerage account. Second, it takes on zero risk. It does not go near the stock market under any circumstances. Third, it still needs to earn something. High-yield savings accounts in 2026 are sitting in the 4 to 5% annual range. That won't make you rich, but it keeps inflation from quietly shrinking your buffer while it waits. Once that cushion is funded and sitting in the right place, the defensive work is done. And that's when the conversation gets genuinely interesting, because the next bucket isn't about protection at all. It's about growth. Specifically, the kind of growth that doesn't require you to do anything extra once the system is running. That's your future wealth engine, and the math behind it tends to surprise people. There is a number that most people never calculate, not because it's hard to find, because it's uncomfortable to look at. It's the amount your future self will have lost, not from bad decisions, not from market crashes, but simply from starting later than you could have. Time is the one variable in investing that money cannot buy back, and the gap it creates is bigger than most people expect. Here's how compound interest actually works. You invest some money. It earns a return. Then that return gets added to your balance. Next period, you earn a return on the original amount plus the return from last time. Then that gets added. Then you earn a return on all of it. Over and over, the number doesn't grow in a straight line. It curves. Slowly at first, then faster still. Albert Einstein reportedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he actually said it or not, the math earns the description. The case study version of this tends to land harder than the theory. Meet 2 guys. Marcus, a 32-year-old high school teacher in Columbus, starts putting $200 a month into a low-cost index fund at age 22. He's not making much at the time, but he starts. Derek, a project manager in the same city, waits until 32 to begin. To compensate for lost time, he invests $300 a month instead. By the time both men reach 65, Derek has contributed roughly $12,000 more of his own money than Marcus. You'd expect him to come out ahead. He doesn't. Assuming a 10% average annual return, Derek's portfolio grows to around $678,000. Marcus, who invested less per month and less overall, finishes with just over $1.2 million. That's a gap of more than $500,000. Not because Marcus was smarter or luckier, because his money had 10 extra years to compound. That's the whole mechanism. Now, you're probably thinking, 10% annual return, is that realistic? Over long stretches, the US stock market has historically averaged somewhere in that range before inflation. In 2026, most long-term index fund projections still use 7 to 10% as a reasonable planning assumption, depending on the time frame. It's not guaranteed, but it's the number that serious long-term investors have been working from for decades, and it holds up across most 30-plus year windows. So where does this money actually go? The answer is tax-advantaged accounts, and using them correctly is where a lot of people leave real money on the table. A Roth IRA, that's an individual retirement account, works like this. You invest money you've already paid taxes on. The growth inside that account, everything it earns over decades, comes out completely tax-free in retirement. In 2026, the annual contribution limit sits at $7,000. For someone in their 30s putting in that full amount every year, the tax-free growth alone over 30 years represents a significant advantage over a standard taxable account. A 401k, your employer retirement account, runs in the opposite direction. Contributions come out of your paycheck before taxes, which lowers your taxable income today. The growth gets taxed when you withdraw it in retirement. If your employer matches contributions, that match is an immediate return on your money that no other investment can replicate. The wealthy don't choose between these. They use both, layering the tax advantages to maximize what compounds over time. That's the future wealth engine. It doesn't require daily attention. It doesn't require picking stocks. It requires starting, contributing consistently, and leaving it alone long enough for time to do its work, which brings us to the one bucket that most financial systems forget to include, the one that makes all the discipline actually sustainable. That's the fun money bucket, and it's more strategic than it sounds. Every rigid financial system eventually breaks down at the same point, not in the budget, not at the investment account. It breaks down on a Friday night when you're tired, you've been disciplined for 3 months straight, and something in your brain says enough. That moment is where most financial plans quietly die, not from a catastrophic decision, from accumulated deprivation. This is the problem that the fourth bucket exists to solve. Fun money is not a reward for good behavior. It's not a cheat code or a guilty concession. It's a load-bearing part of the system. Remove it, and the whole structure becomes brittle. Keep it in, size it correctly, and it's what makes the other 3 buckets sustainable over years instead of weeks. Here's the psychology behind it. When every dollar is accounted for, and none of it is yours to spend freely, the budget stops feeling like a plan and starts feeling like a prison. And people don't stay in prisons voluntarily. They find ways out. An unplanned splurge here, a justified exception there, and before long, the system has so many holes in it that the structure is essentially gone. The fun bucket closes that exit. It gives you a designated space to spend without guilt, without justification, without it meaning the whole plan is off track. Think about how this plays out for someone like Jamie, a 35-year-old civil engineer in Denver. He runs a tight budget, essentials capped, safety net funded, retirement contributions automated. For 4 months, he sticks to it perfectly. Then a close friend visits from out of town and suggests a weekend trip to the mountains. Jamie's instinct is to say no, because it's not in the budget. But the trip happens anyway, because saying no to your closest friend over $200 feels absurd. Except now it's unplanned, and it creates a guilt spiral that quietly undermines his confidence in the whole system. One justified exception leads to another. By month 6, the structure has mostly dissolved. The version of Jamie with a funded fun bucket handles that weekend differently. The money is already there. The trip is already allowed. He goes, he enjoys it, and on Monday morning, his retirement contribution still goes out on schedule. Nothing broke. That's the design. Now, how much should this bucket actually be? The honest answer is that it depends on your income, your fixed costs, and what's left after the other 3 buckets are funded. A reasonable starting point is somewhere between 5 and 10% of take-home income. For someone bringing home $4,500 a month, that's $225 to $450 of genuinely guilt-free spending money. Not a fortune, but enough to live like a real person while the system runs in the background. Where you direct this money matters too. The research on what actually generates lasting satisfaction from spending is fairly consistent. Experiences outperform purchases. A weekend away with people you care about tends to generate more durable happiness than the same amount spent on something you own. Shared moments, travel, meals, hobbies you're genuinely passionate about. These are the categories that hold their value long after the credit card statement arrives. And the goal isn't to spend lavishly. It's to spend intentionally on the things that actually matter to you, while the automated parts of the system handle everything else quietly in the background. That's the complete picture of the fourth bucket. And with all 4 in place, the framework starts to look less like a budgeting exercise and more like something that can genuinely change the direction of a financial life. So let's pull it all together and look at what the 4-bucket framework actually produces when it runs the way it's designed to. Here's the part that usually surprises people. The 4-bucket framework is not complicated. It never was. The reason it works isn't that it's sophisticated. It's because it removes the decision-making from the moment money arrives and replaces it with a structure that already knows what to do. Most financial stress doesn't come from not knowing what you should be doing. It comes from having to decide every single month in real time with competing pressures and incomplete information. The system eliminates that. The decisions get made once, up front, and then the money just follows the path. So let's run through what that actually looks like when all four buckets are working together. Take Ryan, a 38-year-old pharmacist in Minneapolis. He brings home $5,800 a month after taxes. Under the four-bucket framework, his money gets divided the moment it lands. Roughly 55%, that's $3,190, goes to essentials: rent, utilities, groceries, car insurance, and minimum loan payments. That bucket is capped, and he doesn't touch it. 10%, $580, flows automatically into a high-yield savings account. That's his safety net contribution until he hits 3 months of essential expenses. Once that target is reached, that 10% gets redirected toward investments. 20%, $1,160, goes directly into his Roth IRA and 401k, split to maximize the employer match first, then fill the Roth. And the remaining 15%, $870, is his. No rules, no guilt, and spend it however he wants. Now run that forward. By the time Ryan hits 45, assuming consistent contributions and a 7% average annual return on his investment bucket, he's looking at a portfolio somewhere north of $230,000. Not from a windfall, not from a side hustle, from a system that ran quietly in the background while he lived his actual life. That's what the framework produces, not perfection, not an overnight transformation, a direction that compounds over time. And here's what's worth understanding about why the structure works as a whole, not just as four separate ideas. Each bucket protects the one that comes after it. The essentials cap creates room. The safety net protects the investment contributions from being raided during emergencies. The investment bucket builds the long-term position. And the fun bucket keeps the whole thing from collapsing under its own rigidity. Remove any one of them, and the system weakens. Keep all four intact, and they reinforce each other. This is also why the percentages matter less than the structure itself. Whether your essentials land at 50% or 62%, whether your fun bucket is 5% or 12%, the architecture is what carries the weight. The specific numbers adjust to your income, your city, and your situation. The four categories don't. And look, there's nothing magical about this framework. It doesn't require a financial advisor, a complicated spreadsheet, or a specific income level to start. What it requires is a decision, a deliberate choice to stop letting money arrive and disappear on its own terms, and to start giving it a destination before it gets a chance to vanish. Money is a tool. It doesn't have opinions about where it goes. It just goes where it's directed. The four-bucket system is how you become the one doing the directing. That decision, made consistently, is what the difference between two people with identical incomes and completely different financial lives usually comes down to. And that's exactly where the conclusion lands. If you've made it this far, something probably clicked. Not because the four-bucket system is revolutionary, because it's the explanation for something you've already been feeling, the sense that your income should be producing more than it is. The quiet frustration of doing the responsible things and still feeling behind. That feeling isn't a character flaw. It's what happens when money moves without a structure to guide it. The mechanism is straightforward once you see it. Cap what you spend on survival. Protect what you've built with a cash buffer. Put time to work through consistent, automated investing. And give yourself permission to enjoy the life the system is designed to fund. Each bucket reinforces the others. None of them works as well alone. Here's what's worth watching for going forward. Every time money arrives, ask where it's going before it disappears. Notice whether your essential costs are expanding quietly without a decision behind them. Watch whether your safety net is actually funded or just planned. Check whether your investment contributions are automated or dependent on whatever's left over at the end of the month. The structure doesn't have to be perfect to work, it just has to run. And if this raised a question for you, specifically about why two people with identical incomes can end up in completely different financial positions a decade later, that's exactly what we're going to get into next time.